My name is Imani Jackson. I'm 68 years old and I am a widow. At Sunday dinner, my daughter-in-law Amber stood up and screamed at me, in front of my own son, that I was a leech who needed to get a job. She thought I was just some old woman living off their charity. She thought she and my son controlled everything, the house the company my husband and I built from scratch. So I did the only thing I could do. I laughed, right in her face. And then I told her she had 30 days to get out of my house. What she didn't know is that I wasn't just the leech living upstairs. I was the $5 million majority shareholder who was about to take back everything. Before we continue with this story, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to deal with family who thought you were finished. Now back to the story. Sunday dinner at my son Andre's house always followed an unwritten rule. I cooked, they ate, and my daughter-in-law Amber would find something to complain about. I stood in the kitchen, stirring the pot roast I had made from my late husband's recipe. The kitchen itself was a testament to Amber's taste. Cold stainless steel, gleaming white marble countertops, and appliances that probably cost more than my first car. It was a kitchen designed by someone who orders takeout, not by someone who actually cooks. For the past 5 years, ever since my Elijah passed, I had been living with them in this large, empty house in the Atlanta suburbs, a house I had paid for. But in Amber's mind, I was just part of the inventory, the help. She walked in her heels, clicking sharply on the imported tile. Amber is 38, a pale, sharp woman who wears her ambition like expensive perfume. "Mother Imani," she said, her voice tight. "Are you using that olive oil again?" She pointed to the bottle on the counter. "I've told you the organic cold-pressed brand is on the shelf. That one is terrible for our cholesterol." She said it just like that. Our cholesterol. As if I were a child, she was scolding. I bit my tongue. I wanted to tell her that this terrible olive oil was the same brand I'd used for 40 years. It was good enough to build the company that was currently paying for her $5,000 handbag. It was good enough to pay for this very house. But I just nodded. "I'll remember next time, dear." She sighed, a dramatic put-upon sound. "Well, hurry it up. Andre is hungry." She walked out, not offering to carry a single dish. This girl, I thought, knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing. We sat down at the enormous dining table. Andre, my son, sat at the opposite end. He is 40 years old, the CEO of Elijah Logistics, but he wears the title like an oversized suit his father left him. He looked tired, and as usual, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at his plate. Amber, the company's chief financial officer, sat at the head of the table. Her spot. She took a small, delicate bite of the roast beef. "It's a little tough, Mother Imani. Maybe you overcooked it." I just smiled. Perhaps. Amber immediately launched into her favorite topic. "Costs. We simply have to start tightening our belts," she announced to the room. "I've been looking at the household accounts and the expenditures are simply unacceptable. Any, and all, unnecessary expenses must be cut." She said that last part. Unnecessary expenses. While looking right at me. I knew she wasn't talking about her weekly spa appointments or the new car she'd leased last month. She was talking about me. I was the unnecessary expense. Andre shifted in his chair. He looked pained. He finally cleared his throat. "Mum," he started, his voice barely a mumble. "About that. Amber and I were reviewing the company's charitable donations." I put my fork down. My heart went very still. "And we think, given the current market, that perhaps we should pull back." specifically on the Elijah Jackson Scholarship Fund. It's a significant drain on resources right now. I looked at my son. The scholarship fund. The one thing I had asked for when I stepped back from the company. It was my husband's legacy. That fund is not a drain, Andre. I said, my voice quiet but cold. It's the soul of the company. Your father started it to send kids from our old neighborhood to college. Kids like he used to be. It is not up for discussion. Amber couldn't stand it. She threw her napkin down on the table. Legacy. She snapped. We don't need legacy, Imani. We need profit. We need to stop hemorrhaging money on your sentimental projects. Andre looked horrified. Amber, please. Don't. No. Andre. She stood up, her voice rising to a sharp, ugly pitch. I'm tired of tiptoeing around her. She needs to hear this. The company cannot feed you anymore, and we cannot feed you anymore. The room went completely silent. Andre just sank lower in his chair, his face buried in his hands. Amber leaned across the table, her face twisted with a kind of triumphant rage I had never seen before. You are 68 years old, she shouted. You live here for free. You don't contribute. You don't do anything. You just exist. You're a leech. A leech on this family and a leech on this company, a leech. She called me a leech. My son, my only son, just sat there and let her. You need to get a job. She finally screamed the words echoing in the cavernous dining room. Get a job and stop being a leech. I stared at her. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was something else. It was the click of a lock falling into place. And then I did the one thing she never expected. I started to laugh. It wasn't a small laugh. It was a deep, full from the belly laugh. The kind of laugh that comes when you're watching a fool walk right into their own trap. Andre and Amber just stared at me. My laughter had completely derailed them. You... Amber stammered. You think this is funny? I finally wiped a tear from my eye. Oh dear. It is. It truly is. I took a sip of water. A leech. I said, my voice suddenly calm and clear. You're calling me a leech in my own house. Amber scoffed, regaining her composure. Your house? Don't make me laugh, Imani. This house is in Andre's name. We've seen the deed. This is his house. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment I had been waiting for. I smiled at her, a genuine, warm smile. You are absolutely right, sweetheart. His name is on the deed. I saw the smug look on her face. She thought she'd won. But I continued, my name is on the original mortgage, or rather it was. You see, I paid for this house in cash 10 years ago with my money. I only put my son's name on the deed as a trustee to help him build his credit. It's a legal trust that I can revoke at any time. The color drained from Amber's face. Andre looked up, his eyes wide with terror. I leaned forward. But you're right about one thing, Amber. I am done. I am done living with a leech. I looked right into her pale blue eyes. Sweetheart, find yourself a new place to live. I stood up from the table and picked up my own plate. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to my room to read. I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving them frozen in the silence, their expensive half-eaten dinner growing cold on the table. I had barely settled into the armchair in my bedroom, the heavy silence of the house pressing in, when my door burst open. It didn't just open, it slammed against the interior wall, making the picture frame of my late husband Elijah rattle. Andre stumbled in first, his eyes wide with panic. Mum, you can't be serious. You can't do this. This is my house, Mum. My house. He was wringing his hands, looking like the lost little boy he'd always been. But Amber followed right behind him. The shock had worn off, and what replaced it was pure, unadulterated rage. She pushed past Andre, planting herself in the middle of my bedroom floor. "Who do you think you're scaring?" she spat. Her voice was sharp, like broken glass. "You think we're just going to pack our bags? You're bluffing. You're a lonely old woman trying to scare us." She crossed her arms, a smug little smirk playing on her lips. "I'm calling our lawyer in the morning. You can't just evict us. We have rights. You'll be hearing from him, Imani. You can't win this." My son was pleading. My daughter-in-law was threatening. It told me everything I needed to know about who was really in charge of their marriage. She really thought I was just a foolish old woman with no power. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I simply looked at her, letting her arrogance hang in the air. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. "Don't bother calling your lawyer. Save your money. You're going to need it." I walked slowly over to my nightstand, the heavy oak piece Elijah had built with his own hands. I opened the bottom drawer past my reading glasses and my Bible, and pulled out a thick manila folder. Amber and Andre just watched me, their expressions confused. "You see, Amber," I continued, "you're the chief financial officer of a multi-million-dollar company. You're supposed to be good with details, numbers, due diligence. But in all your planning, in all your ambition, you missed the most important detail of all." I held up the first document, the pages crisp. "This," I said, tapping the paper, "is the original mortgage note for this 4,000-square-foot house. And this is the bank receipt showing it was paid in full, 10 years ago, by me, Imani Jackson. Not by Elijah Logistics, not by Andre. By me." I then pulled out the second, more important paper. "And this. This is the notarized quitclaim deed and the revocable living trust agreement that your husband signed. It clearly legally states that I, Imani Jackson, am the grantor, and Andre Jackson is merely the trustee, not the owner. He holds the title in name only as a convenience for my estate, an estate which, as this document proves, I have full and total authority to revoke at any time." Amber's face went white. Not just pale, but a sick, chalky white. I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. The brilliant CFO, the mastermind, finally realized she had built her entire hostile takeover on a foundation of sand. She had never bothered to do a simple title search on the very house she was living in. She whipped her head toward Andre, her eyes flashing with venom. "You," she hissed. "You told me it was yours. You told me you inherited it. You said she was just living here." Andre couldn't even look at her. He just stammered, his eyes on the carpet. I thought, Amber, it's complicated." Amber saw he was useless, a broken tool. So she pivoted. In an instant, the rage vanished, replaced by thick, streaming tears. Her whole face crumpled. She stepped toward me, her hands outstretched. "Mom," she whispered the word, thick with fake sadness. "Mom, I am so sorry. I'm so stressed. The company, the finances, I'm not sleeping. I've been saying horrible things. I didn't mean it. You know I didn't mean it. Please, we're family." It was a good performance, almost believable. But I'd seen better from amateur actors at the local playhouse. She wasn't sorry she said it. She was just sorry she got caught. I held up my hand. Her sobs stopped instantly. "Stop. Just stop. I don't care about your stress, Amber. I don't care about your excuses. I care about what you said. And I care about what you are." I pointed to the door. 30 days. "Mom, please." Andre begged, finally finding his voice. Where will we go? What will we do? That, I said, walking to my bedroom door, is not my problem. I opened it and waited. They shuffled out, defeated. I closed the heavy oak door in their stunned faces. I turned the deadbolt, the solid click echoing loudly in the room. I leaned against the wood, and for the first time that night I let myself shake. Not from fear, from pure, cold rage. They hadn't just insulted me, they had declared war, and they had no idea who they were truly fighting. I took a deep breath, walked back to my chair, and I picked up my phone. I didn't call a lawyer, I called my real family. The phone rang twice. Hi, Auntie. Malik. I said, my voice steady again. Where are you? Just finishing my shift here at the office. Why, what's wrong? I need you, baby, now. Meet me at the old server room and bring your laptop. I'm on my way. Malik is my nephew, my sister's boy. After she passed away, I raised him as my own, right alongside Andre. He's only 19, a certified genius with computers, and smart enough to get an IT internship at Elijah Logistics. Smart enough to keep his head down and just watch. They thought I was an old, weak woman. They forgot I had an inside man. I drove my old 2005 sedan, the one Andre and Amber were always trying to get me to upgrade. The paint was faded, and the engine wasn't quiet, but it was reliable, solid. I kept it because it didn't draw attention. Amber hated this car. She'd told Andre it was embarrassing for the CEO's mother to drive a 15-year-old vehicle. She wanted me in a Lexus, something that matched her image. But I liked this car. It reminded me of a time when things were simple before the cold steel and marble kitchens, a time when my husband Elijah was still alive. I pulled into the back lot of Elijah Logistics at midnight. The building was a dark silhouette against the city lights. This building. My husband and I had picked this spot ourselves. We'd drawn the first blueprints on a diner napkin 25 years ago. Now my son and his wife slept soundly in the house I paid for, thinking they had locked me out. I walked to the rear employee entrance, not the grand glass lobby Amber had installed last year. I pulled out my old security card. It was faded, the picture of me from 20 years ago, barely visible. Amber's new head of security had deactivated it in the system 6 months ago. She told me it was standard procedure for retired personnel. What that girl didn't know, what she never bothered to learn, was that I wasn't retired personnel. I was the one who wrote the security protocols for this building. I was the one who, with Elijah, had created the master override codes back in 2002. My card would always work. The lock beeped green. I stepped inside. The air was cold, recycled. I walked through the dark hallways, my footsteps silent on the carpet. I went straight to the server room. The door was already ajar, a thin slice of light cutting the darkness. Malik was silhouetted against the blinking green and amber lights of the server racks. He turned his laptop under one arm. "Auntie," he whispered. He stepped into the light, and I saw his face. 19 years old, and he had my sister's eyes. He looked at my face, really looked at me. "What happened? I've never seen you look like this. You look furious." Furious isn't the word, baby. I walked past him, running my hand along the cool metal of the racks. This was the nerve center of my company. My company. "Your cousin's wife. Amber. She called me a leech." Malik stiffened. What? She called you a leech." His voice was low, incredulous. "After everything you did, after you handed them the keys to the kingdom." "I handed them the keys, Malik," I said, turning to face him, "because I thought it was the right thing to do. When Elijah passed..." My voice caught for a moment. It always did when I said his name out loud. When he passed 5 years ago, I thought my son was ready. Andre wasn't a builder, not like his father, but I thought he could manage. I thought if I gave him the title, CEO, he would grow into it. I shook my head, the anger returning cold and sharp. And Amber, I made her CFO. I thought she's finance-minded. She'll protect the company. She'll protect Andre. I stepped back. I let them run it. I let them put their names on everything. Make the big speeches, take the bonuses. I wanted them to have a future. I wanted my son to feel like a man. I looked at the blinking lights. And tonight that woman stood in the house I paid for eating the food I cooked and called me a leech because I used the wrong olive oil. She told me to get a job. Malik just shook his head, his own anger rising. She has no idea, does she? They really think you're just some old lady they have to take care of. They think you're weak. That, I said, is the problem. They forgot who I am. I leaned against the server rack. Amber looks at the balance sheets. She's the CFO, but she only sees what I let her see. She sees the monthly stipend I pay myself. She thinks that's all I have. She doesn't see the 60% majority shares I hold in a blind trust. She doesn't see the real estate portfolio Elijah and I built under a separate holding company. She thinks the company is all there is. She has no idea my personal net worth is over $5 million. Malik's eyes went wide. Auntie, I knew you were comfortable, but Malik, why do you think I moved in with them 3 years ago? He frowned. You said, after Andre's kids went off to college, you were lonely. You wanted to help them out around the house. That's what I said. I shook my head. I'm never lonely, baby. I moved in because I saw the quarterly reports. I saw the consulting fees Amber was paying to companies I'd never heard of. I saw the supply contracts being renegotiated for 30% more than they were worth. I knew something was wrong. I needed to be close to listen. I pretended to be a simple, retired old woman because I wanted to see exactly how far they would go. I pushed myself off the rack and looked my nephew in the eye. I never thought they'd go this far. Calling me a leech was a mistake, but trying to kick me out of my own house. I took a deep breath. That was a declaration of war. I trusted them too much, Malik. I trusted my own son. Now they think I'm a senile old fool who's lost her memory. They forgot who built this empire. And tonight I am going to remind them. I woke up before the sun. I wasn't in my own bed. I was in a room at a Marriott off the highway, a room I'd paid for with a credit card Amber didn't know about. 30 days. That's what I had given them. But I was not going to wait. I was going to secure my position. First step, cash. You cannot fight a war without resources, and I needed to hire my own lawyer. I drove my old sedan not to the local branch near the house, but to the main downtown headquarters of Atlanta Trust Bank. I had been a client there for 30 years. Elijah and I had opened our first business account there, back when we were just 2 kids with a dream and 1 truck. The marble floors used to feel like home, but the faces were all new. The old tellers who knew my name, who'd watched Andre grow up. They had all retired. I walked up to a young woman. She was pale with nervous eyes. "Good morning," I said, sliding my bank card and identification across the counter. "My name is Imani Jackson. I need to make a cash withdrawal. $50,000. The teller's eyes went wide. She looked at me. At my simple clothes, my old-fashioned handbag, my dark skin. She didn't see Imani Jackson, founder and majority shareholder of Elijah Logistics. She saw an old black woman asking for an impossible amount of money. "Excuse me, ma'am, 50,000. Yes," I said calmly. "In large bills, please. We'll probably need to go to the vault." She fumbled with her keyboard, her long, painted nails clicking. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to get my manager. One moment, please." She scurried away, leaving me standing there. I looked up at the security camera in the corner and wondered if Amber had already called them. If she had anticipated this. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. This was not going to be easy. A man in a sharp, ill-fitting suit walked out. He looked young, stressed, and he had the look of a man who had been promoted just a little too fast. Mr. Thompson, the old manager, would have had this done in 5 minutes and asked me how my garden was doing. This new man, Mr. Davies, he looked at me with polite suspicion. "Good morning, Mrs. Jackson. I'm the branch manager. You're requesting a rather substantial cash withdrawal." "I am," I said. "Is there a problem?" "My identification is in order." "Yes, well." Mr. Davies cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes. He was looking at his computer screen, frowning. "Mrs. Jackson, I'm afraid I cannot process this transaction at this time." The air left my lungs. "You cannot, or you will not." I kept my voice perfectly level, though my hands were gripping the marble counter so hard my knuckles ached. "That is my money, son. I need it now." "Ma'am, it's not a matter of willingness," he said, shifting his weight. "Your accounts, they've been placed on a temporary hold. They're frozen." "Frozen? On what basis?" I demanded. "I am the sole signatory on that account. I own it. Who authorized this?" Mr. Davies looked deeply uncomfortable. He lowered his voice as if the people in line behind us could hear. "Ma'am, I can't discuss the specifics. It's a legal flag. You'll have to speak with your legal representative or your company's representative." The request came from Elijah Logistics. Elijah Logistics. My company. My name. My husband's legacy. My blood ran cold. Amber. She had moved that fast. She hadn't just changed the locks on my house. She was trying to lock me out of my own life. While I was sleeping in a hotel room, she was starting the war. I looked at the manager. "Young man, you need to unfreeze my account. Now." "Ma'am, I legally cannot," he stammered, taking a step back. "My hands are tied. The flag comes from your company's chief financial officer, a Mrs. Amber Reed." Of course it did. The leech wasn't just satisfied with insulting me. She was trying to starve me out. I needed to know how bad it was. "What reason," I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper, "did Mrs. Reed give for freezing the personal account of the company's founder?" Mr. Davies looked around again, then leaned closer. "Mrs. Jackson, please understand this is highly unusual. The legal order we received. It states that the request was made for your own protection." "My protection?" "Yes, the filing. It came from the law firm representing Elijah Logistics. It alleges—" He couldn't even look at me. He just read from his screen. "It alleges concerns of sudden and severe cognitive decline, diminished mental capacity, and erratic financial behavior." Erratic behavior, diminished capacity. They were painting me as senile. They were using the exact stereotype they had always held against me, an old, foolish, retired woman, and turning it into a legal weapon. My mind flashed back to the dinner. Amber screaming at me. Andre in the corner holding his phone. They hadn't been filming to capture my anger. They'd been filming to capture my agitation. They were building a case. The manager kept talking, his voice sounding very far away. The letter states that Ms. Reed, as CFO, has a fiduciary duty to protect the company's assets and, by extension, the majority shareholder, from herself. I finished his sentence for him. From potential self-inflicted financial harm, pending an emergency court hearing for guardianship. Guardianship. They weren't just trying to evict me. They were trying to own me, to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could take everything. The 5 million, the company, my home, my name. I walked out of that bank. I don't remember saying goodbye. The bright Atlanta sun felt blinding. I got into my car and just sat there for a full minute, my hands shaking on the wheel. Diminished capacity. That girl, that leech, had moved faster and with more venom than I could have ever imagined. She wasn't just trying to get me out of the house, she was trying to erase me, to lock me in a home while she and my son dismantled my husband's legacy. My anger was so cold, so deep, it felt like it would freeze my blood. She moves fast, I whispered to myself. But I move smarter. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Malik yet. I called Mr. Davidson, my lawyer, my friend. He and Elijah had played golf together for 20 years. He'd handled Elijah's will. He would fix this. He would tear them apart. His secretary put me right through. Davidson. His voice was usually warm like old whiskey. Today it was strained. Davidson, it's Imani. She's done it. Amber's frozen my accounts. She's filed for guardianship. I need you to file an injunction. Now. There was a long, terrible silence on the other end of the line. Just the sound of his breathing. Davidson. Did you hear me? Imani, he said, and his voice was heavy. I'm afraid I can't help you. My blood ran cold again, colder than it had in the bank. What do you mean you can't help me? I received an email this morning, Imani, from Andre. He called an emergency virtual meeting of the board of directors late last night. Amber and the new members they appointed. They voted. Imani, they voted you out. Voted me out, I own 60% of the stock. They voted to remove you as chairwoman of the board, effective immediately. He took a shaky breath. The justification was your health. They cited incidents of severe memory loss and agitation. They terminated my firm's services as corporate counsel. Imani, I'm sorry. As of 9 a.m. this morning, I no longer represent you or Elijah Logistics. I hung up the phone. They had done it. A corporate coup. They controlled the board. They controlled the company lawyers. They had frozen my money. They had my son. They had the house. They had just left me with nothing, except the 60%. They thought they had won. They thought the old senile leech was finally cornered. They forgot one thing. A leech only survives if the host is weak. And I was anything but. So there I was. 68 years old, locked out of my home, locked out of my bank accounts, and locked out of the company I had built with my own 2 hands. I sat on the edge of a lumpy bed in a 2-star motel off the interstate. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and bleach. I had used my emergency credit card to pay for the room. A Visa card I'd kept hidden in my wallet for 20 years under a different bank, a bank Amber didn't know about. Elijah always said to have a bug-out bag, a secret stash. Never let anyone he'd said. Not even your own blood know exactly what you have. I thought he was being paranoid. Turns out he was just being smart. I was cut off. No house, no cash, no power. At least that's what they thought. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up. A text from Andre. Mum, please come to the house. We need to talk. I can fix this. Just don't tell Amber you're coming, please. I'm so sorry. I read the message twice. The desperation, the fake secrecy. Don't tell Amber. As if that girl didn't write the message herself and hand him the phone. It was a trap. It was clumsy, it was obvious, and it was insulting. They really thought I was that foolish. They thought my heart was so soft for my son that I'd come running blinded by hope. I knew it was a trap, but I also knew I had to go. You can't fight an enemy until you understand the full scope of their plan. They wanted to play a scene. Fine. I'd show up. I drove my old sedan back to the house. My house. I parked on the street, not in the driveway. I walked up the stone path that Elijah and I had laid one summer. The locks on the front door were new, shiny brass against the old dark wood. My key was useless. I rang the bell. After a long minute, the door opened. Andre stood there. His face was a wreck. His eyes were red. His suit was rumpled. He looked like he hadn't slept, and he looked truly deeply ashamed. For a second, I almost felt pity for him. Mom, he whispered, his voice cracking. Thank you for coming. Come in. He stepped aside. I walked into the foyer. It was quiet. Too quiet. Andre, what is... Thank goodness you're here, Mum. Amber's voice cut through the silence. She walked out of the living room not in her usual power suit, but in a soft cashmere sweater. Her face was arranged in an expression of deep, profound concern. She wasn't alone. Flanking her were two large men in pale blue, orderly uniforms, and standing just behind her, holding a leather briefcase, was a man I didn't recognize. He had the expensive, shark-like look of a high-priced lawyer. The trap was sprung. Andre just stood by the door, his head bowed. He couldn't even look at me. He had delivered me. Mum, Amber said, walking toward me, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Oh, Mum, we were so worried. You missed our 2:00 appointment. I just stared at her. I didn't have a 2:00 appointment, Amber. Oh, honey. She put her hand on my arm. I wanted to shake it off. You see, you did forget. We were supposed to meet Dr. Ramirez. Remember we talked about it all last week, for your memory tests. She was good. She was very, very good. Her eyes were wide, sincere. She looked like the perfect, caring daughter-in-law. And then this morning, she continued, her voice trembling just right. You called me 5 times. 5 times, Mum, just asking me what day it was, over and over. It scared me so much, I didn't know what else to do. The little liar. My phone hadn't left my side. I hadn't made a single call. I felt the eyes of the 2 orderlies on me. I saw the lawyer watching my reaction. They were building their case. They were painting the picture. The confused, agitated old woman. And then I saw him. Andre. He hadn't moved from his spot by the door. He was standing in the corner, partially hidden by a large potted plant. He was holding his phone. But he wasn't holding it like he was going to make a call. It was held up, angled perfectly towards me. The little red light was on. He was filming me. My own son. He had lured me here, his mother, to be ambushed, and now he was filming me waiting for me to do exactly what they expected, waiting for me to scream, to cry, to lunge at Amber, to lose control, to give them the very footage they needed to hand to a judge, to prove I was agitated and unstable. Amber took another step closer, her voice dropping to a soothing, condescending whisper. "It's okay, Mum. We're not angry. You're worried. You look so tired. You're not yourself. These nice men are here to help. They're just going to take you somewhere you can get some rest." She was provoking me, daring me to give her the show she wanted. I looked at the lawyer, at the two orderlies who were now tensing, ready to grab me. I looked at Amber with her fake tears, and then I looked at my son Andre, cowering in the corner, filming his mother's destruction. So I took a deep breath. I felt the rage, hot and sharp, rise in my chest, but I didn't let it out. I let it forge. I let it turn from hot, messy anger into something cold and hard and sharp. I smiled. Not a warm smile. This one was all teeth. I looked right past Amber, right past the medical staff, and I looked directly into the corner, directly at my son. "Andre." My voice was calm. It was loud. It echoed in the foyer. Andre flinched, his phone wavering. "Are you filming this, Andre?" I asked, as if I were asking him to pass the salt. "Good. Make sure you get this next part. Get a real clear shot. You'll want to remember this." Andre's hand started to shake. He didn't lower the phone. I turned my attention from my worthless son to the two orderlies. I gave them my full attention. I stood up straight. The confused old woman act evaporated. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice dropping into the register I used to use when I was closing million-dollar deals. "You are here, I assume, on my account. My name is Imani Jackson. I am the founder and 60% majority shareholder of Elijah Logistics. I am 68 years old and I am in perfect command of my faculties." The men looked at each other. This was not the agitated, senile woman they had been briefed on. I then turned to the shark in the suit. "And you must be Amber's lawyer. You've been advising your client to commit fraud by filing a false petition for guardianship. That is a serious ethical violation, and I will be filing a complaint with the state bar." The lawyer's professional smirk vanished. I turned back to the medical staff. "Now, my daughter-in-law, who is currently attempting to steal my company, insists that I am confused and in need of an evaluation. Fine. I will consent to one. I will not be going somewhere to rest. I will be going to Emory University Hospital, not to some cheap facility you've prearranged. And I will not be seeing your Dr. Ramirez. I will be seeing my personal physician, Dr. Benjamin Coleman, head of geriatric psychology at Emory. I will call him myself and arrange the appointment. You are welcome to send your legal representative to observe my evaluation, which I will pass." I held my head high, my voice ringing with absolute authority. "Are we clear?" The room was dead silent. Amber's face was a mask of pure, unfiltered shock. Her mouth was half open. Her entire plan, the ambush, the fake concern, the paid-for medical staff, had just been completely and totally dismantled. She had been banking on a screaming, confused old woman. She had gotten a CEO instead. The two orderlies looked at the lawyer. The lawyer looked at Amber. He knew. I knew. The trap had failed. These men couldn't legally force a calm, articulate, and cooperative woman into an ambulance when she had just made a perfectly reasonable counteroffer. They had no legal standing. Their petition, was based on a lie, and I had just called their bluff in front of witnesses. The lawyer gave a tiny, almost invisible shake of his head to the orderlies. They stepped back. I looked at Andre, who had finally lowered his phone. His face was ashen. I walked to the front door. I put my hand on the new shiny lock they had installed. "I will be leaving now," I said to the room. But, Mum," Andre started, his voice a pathetic whine. I turned and looked at my son, and at the woman who had tried to destroy me. "You had better enjoy this house while you can," I said, my voice soft but carrying. "You had better enjoy my husband's company, what's left of it. Because you are both living on borrowed time." I opened the front door, walked out into the sunshine, and never looked back. That cheap motel room was a prison. The air was thick with the smell of old smoke, and the neon sign outside buzzed, casting a sickly red light over the thin bedspread. I hadn't slept. I had just waited. At 2 a.m, there was a soft knock. Malik. He slipped in his laptop bag, slung over his shoulder, his face pale and grim in the dim light. He didn't say hello. He just set his laptop on the rickety table, plugged it in, and turned it on. "Auntie," he said, his voice low, "you need to see this. It's worse than we thought. Worse than filing for guardianship on a mother who isn't sick." I asked, my voice flat. He shook his head. "That's just the cover story. That's just how they plan to get your 60%. He turned the screen toward me. "I did what you said," he explained, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "I used my admin access to look at the servers, but I also looked at Amber's personal hard drive, the one she keeps locked in her desk. I borrowed it for an hour." "You hacked her," I stated. "I got justice." He corrected me, his eyes hard. "Auntie, they aren't just trying to take the company. They're trying to kill it." He opened a folder. It was labeled Restructure. "She's been busy, Auntie, for 3 years. He showed me the documents, one after another. Shell corporations, 3 of them all registered in Delaware, all listing a managing partner I'd never heard of. A name that was not Jackson. "These are fake companies, right?" I asked. "Worse," Malik said. "They're her companies." I traced the incorporation papers. They're registered to a P.O. box, which is registered to her cousin in Vermont. Then he showed me the invoices. Hundreds of them. Contracts for logistical consulting, fleet management, software optimization. Millions of dollars, my company's dollars, being paid out every month to these 3 fake companies. "She's not just skimming, Auntie," Malik said, his voice cracking with anger. She's siphoning. She's the leech. She's been draining Elijah Logistics dry, month after month, right under Andre's nose." "No," I whispered, my hand coming to my mouth. "Not under his nose." Malik's face fell. He opened another file. An email chain. From Andre to Amber. "Just keep it moving," my son had written. "The old woman will never notice. We'll have enough to start over in 6 months. She'll be in a home, and we'll be free." They were in it together. My son, my Andre. He wasn't just weak. He was a willing participant. He was helping her destroy his own father's legacy. I stared at the screen, at the words written by my own child. The son I had nursed. The son I had raised, the son I had handed an empire to. The betrayal was so deep, so absolute, it was almost silent. There was no room for tears. The pain was too big. It simply turned into something else. Something cold. Something heavy. "They're destroying my husband's company," I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. "They're taking the money Elijah and I bled for, and they're just stealing it." I looked at the total. $7 million. "They're going to run then," I said. take the money and disappear. No, Auntie, Malik said, his face grim. That's not the end game. It's worse. He pulled up one last file. It was a PowerPoint presentation. Amber's official letterhead. They're not going to run, Malik explained. They're going to declare bankruptcy. They've been cooking the books, moving the assets. They're going to tell the world that Elijah Logistics is broke. My mind raced. So they declare bankruptcy. The company folds, and they walk away with the $7 million. And then, Malik said, clicking to the next slide, they buy back all the assets, the trucks, the warehouses, our entire fleet, for pennies on the dollar at the bankruptcy auction. They'll use the $7 million they stole from you to buy what's left of your company. The final slide popped up. A new logo. Reed Logistics. Amber's maiden name. They're not just stealing from you, Malik whispered. They're going to erase him. They're going to erase Elijah Jackson. They're going to erase you. It'll be like you never even existed. I sat there in that cheap, smoky motel room and looked at the full scope of their plan. The sheer cold-blooded audacity of it. The disrespect. Not just to me, but to the memory of my husband. The son I raised. No, I said. The word was quiet. Auntie. No. I stood up. The grief was gone. The shock was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard fury. They will not, I said, erase my husband. Auntie, what are we going to do? Malik asked, looking up at me. They've taken everything. The accounts are frozen. They control the board. The lawyers won't talk to you. They think they control everything, I said. I felt calm, colder than I had ever felt in my life. They're about to find out they control nothing. Malik suddenly sat up straight. Auntie. Oh no. This just came in. He pointed to his screen. A new email alert had popped up in the company system. What is it? It's from Andre. He's calling an emergency meeting of the board of directors for tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. I looked at the screen. The subject line read, Urgent vote on the future financial viability of Elijah Logistics. This is it, Malik said, his voice shaking. This is when they're going to do it. This is the bankruptcy vote. I stood there for a long moment. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark highway, the cars streaming past. They've called the meeting, I said. They've set the trap. They're about to walk right into it. I turned back to Malik, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I smiled. Good, I said. Let them. Let them all gather in one room. Let them all put their names on the record. I looked at my nephew. Malik, that big presentation screen in the main boardroom, the one they use for their little PowerPoint shows, you know how to connect your laptop to it, don't you? A slow, wide grin spread across Malik's face. Auntie, he said, I'm the one who installed the whole system. Perfect. I picked up my phone. I didn't call the police. I didn't call the lawyers Amber had hired, or the ones she had fired. I scrolled through my contacts all the way to the bottom, to a name I hadn't called in years. The phone rang. One ring, two rings. A deep voice answered. Jerome. Jerome, I said. It's Imani. Imani Jackson. There was a pause. Imani, he said, his voice full of warmth and surprise. My God, it's been too long. How are you, my friend? I'm at war, Jerome, and I need my best soldier. Jerome Washington. He wasn't just any lawyer. He was Elijah's best friend. He was the sharpest corporate lawyer in the state of Georgia, and he had been waiting for this call. I need you tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. sharp, I said. Elijah Logistics headquarters, the main boardroom. I'll be there, he said. No questions asked. Oh, and Jerome, I added, looking at the evidence on Malik's screen. Yes, Imani. It's finally time. Bring your briefcase. We're taking back my company. The main boardroom of Elijah Logistics was my husband's pride and joy. He'd insisted on a solid mahogany table 20 feet long and a wall of glass overlooking the Atlanta skyline. It was a room built for power, for legacy. As I stood outside the double doors at 9:58 a.m., I could feel the cold hum of the air conditioning. Malik was beside me, his laptop clutched to his chest. Beside him stood Jerome Washington, Elijah's oldest friend, holding a thick leather briefcase. Jerome looked at me and nodded once. He was ready. I peeked through the small glass window in the door. They were all there. Andre, my son, sat at the head of the table, or rather he sat in the chair his father used to sit in. He looked small, swallowed up by the high-backed leather. Beside him was Amber, looking sharp and severe in a bright white suit like a predator ready to strike. And surrounding them, the new board. I didn't recognize any of them. Where had my husband's old partners gone? The men we'd built this company with. They were gone. Replaced by these 5 faces, all pale, all men, all wearing the same fake, serious expression. These were Amber's people, hired guns she'd brought in to help her bury the company. They were accomplices there to rubber stamp the death of my legacy. The atmosphere in that room, even through the glass, felt thick, tense. They were waiting for the signal to begin the execution. I took a deep breath. Jerome put a hand on my shoulder. Are you ready for this, Imani? I looked at him, my oldest and dearest friend. Jerome, I said. My voice steady. I've been ready for 5 years. At exactly 10 a.m., I heard Amber's voice, high and clear, call the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I let her talk. I wanted her to walk right into the center of the trap. I let her go for 2 full minutes. We stood in the hallway listening. Malik had his phone out, linked to the room's audio system. We heard everything. As you can see from the projections, Amber's voice was smooth rehearsed. She sounded sad. What a performance. We are facing an unprecedented market downturn. Malik held his phone up so I could hear better. Unfortunately, she continued, this downturn combined with some, let's be frank, some questionable management decisions from the previous leadership. I felt my spine stiffen. Previous leadership. That was me. She was blaming me. She was blaming Elijah. She was blaming the very foundation that gave her the power to sit in that chair. She's good, Jerome whispered, his voice grim. She's poisoning the well. The numbers simply don't lie, Amber said. I could picture her clicking the remote, moving to the next slide, the one Malik had showed me with all the faked red arrows pointing down. Elijah Logistics is currently insolvent. We are facing catastrophic debt. We are quite simply out of options. She paused for dramatic effect. Therefore, Andre and I, as your executive team, are formally proposing that the board vote to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It is the only responsible way forward. It will allow us to liquidate the non-performing assets and restructure. Restructure. The same word from her hidden files. The word that meant steal. That, I said to Jerome, is my cue. I didn't knock. I pushed the heavy oak doors open. Both of them. They swung open with a heavy whoosh that cut the air. Every single head in that room snapped toward me. The sound of Amber's voice died in her throat. Her mouth hung open. I had chosen my outfit very carefully that morning. Not the simple faded cardigans I wore around the house. Not the clothes of a leech. I was wearing my favorite suit, a custom-tailored wine-red power suit, the one I'd worn when I closed the biggest deal of my career, the one Elijah always said made me look like a queen. I put on my pearls. I stood tall. I let them look at me. I let them see the woman they had mistaken for a confused old widow. I didn't stop in the doorway. I walked straight into the room. My heels clicked on the floor. Click, click, click. The only sound in the room. Malik was right behind me, his laptop open and ready. Jerome Washington, a man everyone in Atlanta legal circles knew and feared, walked in behind him, his briefcase in hand. I walked past the shocked faces of Amber's new board members. I walked right up to the end of that long mahogany table, stood opposite my son and his wife. I looked Amber right in the eyes. Her face was chalk white. "You were saying something about bankruptcy, Amber," I asked, my voice calm. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that." It took Amber a full 3 seconds to find her voice. When she did, it was a high-pitched shriek. "Mother, what? What are you doing here? You can't be here. You were removed. This is a closed meeting." She turned to Andre. "Andre, do something, call security, get her out." Andre just stared at me. He looked like he was going to be sick. He couldn't move. He was completely, utterly useless. "Security," I said, letting out a small laugh. "Oh, sweetheart, they won't be coming. I put them on a paid break half an hour ago. You see, you've made a few critical errors in your little plan." I walked around the table, placing my hand on the back of my husband's chair. "You're right about one thing. Your new hand-picked board members, the ones you've been paying off, they did vote to remove me as chairwoman. A procedural error on my part. I got comfortable. I got lazy. My mistake." "But you, the brilliant CFO," I said, looking right at Amber. "You forgot to read the company bylaws. The bylaws I wrote in 1998. You cannot remove me as the majority shareholder. I still own 60% of this company, and according to Article 4, Section 2, the majority shareholder retains absolute veto power over any vote regarding the dissolution or bankruptcy of this corporation." I looked at the shocked faces of her board. "So, no, we will not be voting on bankruptcy today." I smiled at Amber. She was still standing, trembling with rage. "Now, sit down." She didn't move. I said, "Sit down." Amber sank into her chair, her mask of control completely shattered. "Thank you," I said politely. "Now you've given your presentation. I found it very creative, but it was full of lies. So I'd like to present a more realistic financial report." Malik didn't hesitate. He walked right past Amber, and Andre pulled the HDMI cable from her laptop and plugged it into his own. The large presentation screen at the end of the room, the one that had just been showing Amber's fake downward trending charts, flickered for a second. And then the true logo of Elijah Logistics filled the screen. Bold, strong, the one my husband had designed himself. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room, "you have just been presented with a very compelling story of failure. You were told this company is insolvent. You were told it's hemorrhaging money due to questionable management from the past." I let my eyes rest on each of Amber's new board members. They wouldn't look at me. "But that is a lie. The truth," I said, my voice dropping, "is that Elijah Logistics is not losing money. It is being stolen." "Malik," I said, "if you would." Malik, my brilliant nephew, stepped up. He was no longer the quiet IT intern. He was a man in command. "Good morning," he said, his voice clear and confident. For the past 3 years, our CFO, Ms. Reed, has been funneling company funds into 3 separate shell corporations. Click. The screen changed. Slide 1. These 3 companies, Apex Freight Solutions, Delaware Strategic Planners, and White Pine Holdings, are registered in Delaware to a P.O. box. They have no employees, no assets, and no trucks. They are ghosts. He clicked again. Slide 2. And yet, here are the contracts, signed by Ms. Reed, and in several cases, co-signed by our CEO, Mr. Jackson. Scans of the contracts filled the screen. My son's signature, large and looping, right next to hers. These contracts total over $7 million. They are for logistical services and software consulting that were never ever rendered. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioner humming. Malik clicked again. Slide 3. A complex web of bank transfers appeared. A flowchart showing money leaving Elijah Logistics and moving through the 3 shell companies, and finally landing in one single offshore account. And here, Malik said, is where that $7 million ended up. A private numbered account in the Cayman Islands. An account that we traced back, directly to Ms. Amber Reed. Amber let out a sound. A gasp, a choke. This is slander. I'm not finished, Malik said. He clicked one last time. Slide 4. An email from Imani Jackson to Amber Reed, sent 3 months ago. The words filled the screen for everyone to see. Just keep it moving. The old woman will never notice. We'll have enough to start over in 6 months. She'll be in a home, and we'll be free. I watched as Andre read his own words on the screen. He slumped in his chair as if his bones had turned to water, and he put his head in his hands. The leech was not me. It was them, and I had the receipts. The silence in the room was so thick I could barely breathe. Amber's hand-picked board members, the men she'd brought in to rubber stamp her theft, looked like they'd just seen a ghost. They stared at the screen, then at Amber, then back at the screen. Their golden parachute had just evaporated. My son, Andre, he didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just collapsed. He folded in on himself, sinking into his father's chair, and buried his face in his hands. A weak, whimpering sound escaped his throat. But Amber was not weak. She was a cornered animal. She sprang to her feet, her chair scraping violently against the floor. "Lies!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "This is all lies, that it brat." She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at Malik. "He hacked my personal computer. This is illegal. It's inadmissible. This is a violation of my privacy. You can't use any of this." She was desperate, appealing to the very laws she had been breaking for 3 years. She started advancing toward Malik, but Jerome Washington, my lion, stepped silently in her path. He was a big man, and he didn't have to raise his voice to command the room. "Ms. Reed," he said, his voice a calm, deep rumble. "It is not a violation of privacy when you use company hardware to commit a $7 million felony against that same company. My intern," he nodded at Malik, "was performing a routine security audit. And this is not slander. This is called evidence." Jerome turned from her to the 5 pale-faced board members. "And as the legal representative for the true majority shareholder, Ms. Imani Jackson," he placed his hands on the table, "I hereby call for an immediate vote. The dismissal of this entire corrupt board of directors and the termination with cause of Chief Executive Officer Imani Jackson and Chief Financial Officer Amber Reed for gross misconduct, conspiracy, and corporate fraud." The board members looked at each other frantic. One of them started to raise his hand, maybe to object, maybe to agree. But I held up my own. Thank you, Jerome, I said, my voice cutting through the panic. But that won't be necessary. Andre looked up, his eyes red. Amber froze. What? What do you mean? She stammered. I just smiled. I mean, I said that a vote implies you still have a choice in the matter. You don't. Right on cue, the heavy oak boardroom doors swung open again. This time it wasn't me. It was two Atlanta Police Department officers. One black, one white. Both tall. Both looking very, very serious. Jerome had sent the entire evidence package to the district attorney's office last night. The officers walked straight past the board members. They walked right up to the head of the table. Amber Reed? The first officer asked. Imani Jackson. Andre let out a small, terrified sound. You are both under arrest, the officer continued, his voice flat, for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, embezzlement, and corporate malfeasance. No! No! Amber shrieked as the second officer took her arm. She tried to pull away. You can't arrest me. I am this company. Get your hands off me. The officer was not impressed. He efficiently pulled her arms behind her back. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was the most beautiful sound I had heard in 5 years. Andre didn't fight. He just held his hands out, tears streaming down his face, repeating, I'm sorry, Mum. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. They started to lead Amber out. She was still fighting, still trying to find a way out. She twisted around her face, purple with rage, and screamed at me. You old witch, you did this. You're a leech. You're nothing. Where will you even live? Huh. That house is mine. I checked. My name is on the deed. I'm the owner. You can't get rid of me. She was halfway out the door, still screaming about the house. I let her finish. I waited until the room was quiet again. I looked at the officers. One moment, please. I'd like to answer her question. I walked over to her. She was breathing hard, her makeup smeared. I looked down at this child who had tried to destroy me. I didn't smile. Not this time. Ah, yes. About that, I said, my voice very, very quiet. That was your second mistake. You see the bank that holds the trust on that house. Atlanta Trust. The president, Mr. Coleman, is a very old friend of mine. He was one of Elijah's pallbearers. I called him this morning. He was very interested to learn how the trustee of my property was attempting to commit fraud. He reviewed the trust agreement, the one you never bothered to read. It has a violations clause, and it turns out attempting to have the grantor, that's me, falsely declared incompetent, is a major violation. The bank is foreclosing on the property tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. You're not just losing your job, dear. You're losing my house. I leaned in a little closer just so she could hear me. And Amber, you should really take your own advice. Find a job. And stop being a leech. I stepped back. Officers, you can take her now. The doors closed, leaving a blessed, heavy silence. The police were gone. My son was gone. The leech was gone. The only people left in the room were Jerome Malik and the 5 traitorous board members, who were now sweating through their expensive suits. I turned to them. As for you gentlemen, I said, your services are no longer required. Your complicity has been noted. You will hand over your company keycards, phones, and laptops to Malik on your way out. Security will escort you. They didn't argue. They just deflated. One by one, they filed out of the room, defeated. Finally, it was just the 3 of us. My lawyer, my nephew, me. Jerome clapped Malik on the back. "Good work, son. Your father would have been proud." "Thank you, sir," Malik said. But he was looking at me. I walked to the head of that long mahogany table. I ran my hand over the wood, the chair Elijah had loved. I pulled it out, and for the first time in 5 years I sat it down. It fit perfectly. "Jerome," I said, "call the old board. Call Henry. Call Cynthia. Call everyone Andre and Amber fired. Tell them we're bringing the family back together." I looked at Malik, who was already working on his laptop securing the servers. "Malik," I said. He looked up. "Yes, Auntie." "Congratulations. You're the new Chief Technology Officer of Elijah Logistics. Go get your name put on an office door." A slow smile spread across his face. "Yes, ma'am. I can do that." I looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. My city, my company, my husband's legacy. It was safe. The leech was gone. The queen was back on her throne. Imani's story teaches us a powerful lesson about respect, strength, and the fatal danger of underestimation. Amber and Andre made a critical mistake. They looked at the matriarch of their family and saw a burden. They saw a leech, a confused, forgetful old woman they could easily manipulate and discard. They were so blinded by their own greed, so arrogant in their plotting, that they forgot who she truly was. They forgot she was the architect of the entire empire they were living off. They thought her silence meant weakness. They mistook her patience for senility. They never realized that while they were busy filming her for evidence, she was the one gathering the real receipts. Imani wasn't just a retired grandmother. She was the queen temporarily stepping back to observe her chaotic court. Her victory wasn't just about reclaiming her $5 million. It was about reclaiming her name and her husband's legacy. She proves that true strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet, methodical intelligence that waits for the perfect moment to remind everyone exactly who is in charge. They called her a leech, but she proved she was and always had been the foundation. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to remind a family member exactly who you are.